I'm Keshava, this is Suryani if you don't know us, and we serve primarily up at Ananda, West LA, and it's a joy to be here with you guys today. I'm suddenly reminded of an experience I had when I was in high school. My mother sort of threw me into a speech competition because I had a natural ability to speak in front of groups of people, and I was an actor. I enjoyed acting, and so she said, well, you're going to be great at a speech competition. Anyway, I was so resistant to being in this speech competition that I didn't even write my speech. My mother, on the other hand, was so enthusiastic about the prospect of me being in the speech competition that she actually ended up writing my speech for me. Now, if you've watched enough people give speeches that they don't write, you know that it doesn't really work out very well. But I memorized this thing and I went to this competition, and I won like the first round, and then I went to a higher level of competition. And I remember the moment I saw the person beat me, it's because she took the mic off the microphone stand and started just talking from her own center, and I realized she's got it. She's going to beat me, because I realized in that moment that I was just regurgitating a set of words that someone else had written, and it really actually meant nothing to me. And it wasn't coming from my center, but this girl who beat me was speaking dynamically and truthfully and creatively from her own self. And it wasn't a matter of competition for me at that point. I watched her and I thought, she should win! Her time's clearly better than mine. I hope she does, and she did. But the reason I bring this up, and I think it's actually apropos, is because to be a channel for joy, we have to come from our own center. We have to come from our own origin. You know, I was talking about creativity and originality with Peter recently, and it's so interesting that in today's age, we have this unfortunate misconception that to be original or to be creative means that you have to do something that someone else has never done before. You have to do it in a way that no one's ever done. But that's just not true. To be original, to be creative, means simply to come from your point of origin. Swami Kriyananda said that, and I remember the first time I read that, it was like a light bulb went off in my mind. That we don't have to do something that no one has ever heard of before. You don't have to paint paintings by putting paint on your face and rubbing it on the floor. You can create something beautiful and original by simply letting it come from your own center. And this is what Swami Kriyananda did in his music. If you listen to Swami Kriyananda's music, it's not incredibly complex in its outward form, but it is so effective. It's the most effective music I've ever played, and I've been playing music for 20 years. But his music strikes immediately to the heart of every listener because it came from the heart of Swami Kriyananda. It came from the center of all creation, because Yogananda said that God is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And in essence, that's what we are in our own selves. We are center everywhere, circumference nowhere, in ourselves, at our point of origin. So how do we be a channel for joy in the world? Find your center of origin. Find who you are in your true self. And this is why we meditate. This is why we practice the techniques that Yogananda brought, the techniques of Kriya Yoga, because they remind you. They just hold up the mirror and say, this is who and what you truly are. Because the sun doesn't have to be creative to share light. It's his nature. He just shines. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, he shines. Does he ever take a day off? He just shines. That's what he is. We all have an inner sun within us that is ready to radiate the light of creativity, the light of joy constantly. But it's just being hidden by our own misconceptions, our own delusions. And so to be a channel of joy means to just get rid of those things and to remind yourself, to remember truly who and what we really are. One of the great ways to become a channel for joy in the world is to try and act creatively. Because to act creatively requires, first, that you move from your point of origin. Because if you don't, I'm sure as we've all tried, if you sit down and, I don't know if anyone has ever tried writing creatively before, but Swami Kriyananda also talked humorously that he had a friend in college who was going to be a novelist, and he would sit down and would lock his horns with the front page of his manuscript and would get as far as chapter 1. patron. And was never able to actually write creatively because he was never in his own center. He was so concerned with all these outward manifestations, all the intellectual hair splitting of differentiating what is different from himself, that he was never able to actually create from his center. But simultaneously, Swami Kriyananda was perhaps the most creative person I have ever heard of, writing over 450 pieces of music, 144 books. And he said that when he would write music, he didn't have to try. He said he just tuned in to his own center, to the heart of everything. He would call on God and he would say, God, I need a melody that expresses this, this, and this. Give it to me. And instantly it would be there. And that's how we can be channels for joy in everything we do, by trying to act creatively and dynamically. But we don't have to be genius composers. We don't have to be brilliant spiritual leaders to exhibit creativity. We can be creative in the smallest things in our life. We can be creative in the way you put on your pants in the morning. I said one time, it just slipped out of my mouth, I said, I put on my pants just like everybody else does, with a running start. And it was a joke. But the thing is, we can do little things with creative energy, with creative vibration, with our creative God-given intelligence. We don't have to do something the same way we've always done it. We can do it with ever new joy, with ever new concentration, with ever new immersion of ourselves into the flow of divine grace. And when we do this, we bring God's joy into whatever it is that we're doing. Like Michael said, don't have a job, have creative service. Don't just drive home, have an adventure home. Don't just cook a meal, create art. Everything is a potential opportunity to uplift your environment and uplift the people that you're with.
And one of the best ways to enjoy and be a channel for joy is to share it with other people, get other people involved. Because it's nice to be creative and be powerhouses, but today we were talking about the 4 stages of consciousness, development of consciousness, and the first stage was darkening, the second one was ego-centered, contractive, and it's really nice, you know, we get to be the creative, but when we're creative and then it starts turning inward to the ego and it's like, oh, I'm really creative, look at this movie I've produced, look at all of this that I have done, it starts to contract. And so a way to go to the third stage, which is the ego-centered, yeah, but expansive, is to get other people involved or do it for other people.
So one thing I wanted to kind of conclude with is a slightly different angle to how to be a channel for joy. And that is to learn to tune into the subtle vibrations of joy that are constantly permeating the universe, that are constantly flowing through all of us. Because we can be like a kickstart on the engine by saying yes, by seizing the opportunities that life presents us, by being courageous, by being willing. But we don't have to generate all of the power. In fact, truly, none of the power is our own. Everything that we have, all creativity, all joy, all beauty comes from a divine source. Yogananda said that thoughts are universally and not individually rooted, meaning that every thought that you think was already created and residing in a certain level of consciousness in creation. And we, like a radio station, were merely picking up that song. And so the question becomes, what song do you want to sing? What song do you want to flow through you? And as Yogananda said, one of my favorite quotes of his, he said, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. And this sounds like a really charming spiritual axiom, but in fact it is literally true. The instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. I'm a cellist. Like I said, I've been playing for nearly 20 years. And you know, there's a phenomenon that happens in music when an instrument can be created with genius. For example, Stradivarius is widely regarded as one of the greatest instrument makers of all time, or at least in this yuga. But what's amazing to contemplate is his instruments today are better than when he created them. Mm-hmm. Because the instruments, these violins, these cellos, literally progress and develop in their richness, in their sound, in their receptivity, in their ability to be a channel by being played. Instruments improve by being played. And they have scientifically been able to show this. And more than that, instruments improve based upon the competency and the refinement of the person playing them. Meaning that these instruments, these great Stradivarius instruments who have been passed down generation to generation to the greatest musicians of every era, these instruments have been played for 300 years, 400 years by the best musicians in the world. And now they are so much more than just wood and resin and strings and a bow and horsehair, but they are living representations of all of those hours of love and joy that have poured through them by countless musicians, by countless creative intelligence. And so we too are actually the same. I had this revelation when I was playing my cello more, that here I was thinking I was responsible for making music, but if you were to take the cello away from me, I couldn't play. It was a cooperative venture, the cello and me. And then I realized, well, I play my cello because, the cello can't make sound without you. It takes your hands, it takes your arms, it takes the breath of your life flowing through it. And so I realized, well, the cello can't play without me, and I can't play without the cello. But then I realized, but who's really the musician here? God. God is playing the instrument called Keshava. And it's through that instrument that music is made. And it's by becoming an ever more refined instrument for the divine will that we can sing the song of ever conscious, ever new, ever existing joy, bliss, peace, harmony to everyone. And so, like a radio, learn to refine your consciousness until at last there's no static between you and the infinite source. And the song that flows through you sings to every heart, every atom of creation, God, God, God.